It's happening quietly, behind the scenes, without the usual fanfare or media panic, but make no mistake, something massive is brewing in the American economy. Thousands of jobs are being wiped out almost overnight, and it's not just because of artificial intelligence, automation, or remote work. This time, it's something far more immediate and frightening. Major companies, including household names, are preparing for a wave of layoffs so large it could rival the job cuts seen during the 2008 financial crisis. But here's the shocking part: these layoffs aren't happening because business is bad. In fact, many of these companies are still turning a profit, still pulling in billions in revenue, still sitting on massive customer bases. The real issue is corporate debt. During the pandemic, when interest rates were at rock bottom, companies borrowed enormous amounts of money, trillions of dollars, in fact assuming they'd be able to pay it off or refinance it when things got better. But things didn't get better the way they expected. The Federal Reserve hiked interest rates aggressively, more quickly than most businesses had ever seen in modern history. And now, that cheap debt is coming due. Companies that once paid $1 million a year in interest on their loans are now facing 3 times that amount, or more. Their profit margins are being squeezed to the breaking point, and they have only 2 options: either pay up or cut costs dramatically. And we all know what that means. Cutting costs always starts with laying off workers. Payroll is the single largest line item for most businesses, and it's the first thing they slash when money gets tight. A mid-sized tech company that borrowed $100 million at 2% interest now faces payments of $6 million a year instead of $2 million. That extra $4 million has to come from somewhere, and that somewhere is usually jobs. Customer service representatives, warehouse workers, marketing teams, developers, entire departments are being downsized or eliminated altogether. But it's not just the tech sector that's feeling the pressure. Retail, construction, manufacturing, logistics, even healthcare, they're all being squeezed. Retailers like Bed Bath & Beyond didn't collapse just because of poor management decisions, they were literally crushed by debt payments that ballooned beyond what their profit margins could handle. They couldn't refinance, and without new financing, they couldn't survive. The result? Store closures, liquidation, and thousands of layoffs across the country. And that's just one example. Across America, dozens of retail chains are negotiating desperately with banks and private lenders to avoid the same fate. Some of these negotiations end in restructuring, but most end in job cuts. Construction and real estate are being hit even harder. Developers borrowed billions to build shopping centers, apartment complexes, office buildings, and more, expecting to refinance those loans when the projects were finished. But now the math doesn't work. A $50 million loan that used to cost $1 million a year now costs $3 million. That extra $2 million in debt service eats up all the profit from the project, and with banks tightening their lending standards, many developers can't even finish what they started. So they lay off construction crews, stop work on half-finished sites, and try to offload properties at fire sale prices to anyone willing to take the risk. And the buyers? They're not overpaying. They know the developers are desperate. It's a brutal game of survival where the workers lose every time. And it's not just companies that are being choked by these rising rates, it's also the banks. Regional banks across the country are under intense pressure because of the loans they made during the boom. They're being hit by defaults, foreclosures, and refinancing risks that threaten to unravel their entire portfolios. Remember Silicon Valley Bank? That collapse was just the tip of the iceberg. That wasn't about crypto or tech, it was about interest rate risk. And as these smaller banks pull back on lending, the companies that depend on them for short-term credit are being left out in the cold. They can't get new loans. They can't refinance old ones. So they start cutting quietly, ruthlessly, and without the usual headlines. They let people go in small batches, hoping not to attract attention, hoping to survive just one more quarter. But this quiet wave is turning into a tsunami. Manufacturing companies that ramped up production during the pandemic are now scaling back aggressively. They bet big on continued demand, expanded capacity, took on loans to upgrade facilities and hire more workers, and now those decisions are backfiring. Demand has cooled, margins are shrinking, and those debt payments are becoming unsustainable. Some manufacturers are shutting down entire production lines. Others are moving operations overseas, chasing lower labor costs and better tax environments. The result? more American jobs gone. And healthcare, once seen as recession-proof, is now on shaky ground. Hospitals and healthcare providers borrowed heavily during COVID to expand, hire, and upgrade infrastructure. Now they are facing higher labor costs, fewer patients in some areas, and a mountain of debt that's no longer cheap. They are being forced to merge, consolidate, and in many cases, cut staff. Nurses, technicians, administrative staff all at risk, even as demand for healthcare remains high. It's a paradox that doesn't make sense until you follow the money. Profitable services are being slashed not because they are failing but because their debt obligations are spiraling out of control. And here's where it gets even more disturbing. The companies making the biggest headlines with layoffs, big tech, major retailers, multinational conglomerates, aren't even the ones in the most trouble. They're doing layoffs as a way to stay lean, to pivot, to reposition. They have the cash to survive. The real damage is happening quietly, in the companies you've never heard of. The regional food distributor with 200 employees. The warehouse logistics firm with 500 workers. The medium-sized manufacturing plant in Indiana. The local retail chain in the Midwest. These companies don't have PR departments or Wall Street analysts explaining their cuts. They just shut down a facility, lay off a team, and move on. These are real people, real jobs, real communities being gutted while the country watches AI trends and stock market tickers. And what makes this even more tragic is that these companies didn't do anything wrong. They made decisions that made perfect sense at the time. Borrowing money at near zero interest rates to expand, hire, grow, it wasn't reckless, it was smart business. But the rules of the game changed. The cost of capital tripled. And there's no bailout coming. There's no lifeline for the mid-sized business struggling to make payroll because their interest payments just shot up by millions overnight. And the government? Preoccupied with inflation, focused on macroeconomic data, slow to act. Even the companies that do have options are choosing to downsize. Apple, Microsoft, Meta, Amazon, they are sitting on mountains of cash, but they are still cutting back. They've seen the writing on the wall. They know higher rates are here to stay, and that means higher costs, lower risk tolerance, and tighter operations. Every department is being scrutinized. Every team must justify its existence. Projects that would have been greenlit 2 years ago are being shelved. Offices are being consolidated. Expansion plans are on hold. And yes, that means more layoffs, even from companies that are still profitable. This new wave of layoffs isn't about failing businesses, it's about survival. It's about protecting profit margins in a new economic reality where money is no longer cheap. It's about companies making brutal decisions to stay afloat. And as those decisions ripple through the economy, we are seeing the impact in real time. Fewer jobs posted. More resumes circulating. Communities losing their largest employers. Households suddenly down to one income. It's not theoretical anymore. It's real. And it's only just beginning. The worst part? The timeline. Most of this debt comes due between now and the end of 2025. That means the wave we are seeing now is just the beginning. Every month, more loans mature. More companies must decide whether to refinance at sky-high rates or slash their budgets. And the longer the Federal Reserve keeps rates elevated, the more brutal those decisions become. We are not heading for a soft landing, we are barreling toward a hard correction that could leave millions without jobs in the coming year and a half. The industries that borrowed the most during the pandemic will be the first to fall. But the ripple effects will touch everyone. This isn't just about job cuts. It's about lost confidence, broken trust, shrinking opportunity. It's about Americans who did everything right, went to work, paid their taxes, contributed to their communities, now being told they are no longer needed because of interest rates they had no control over. It's about towns that relied on one or two employers suddenly seeing their tax base disappear, their schools underfunded, their main streets shuttered. It's about families being forced to relocate, rent, or start over entirely. But there's something else happening, too. A growing awareness. People are starting to realize this isn't just a tech issue or a pandemic hangover. It's a structural shift in how businesses operate under high-interest environments. And unless something changes, unless lending loosens, unless rates fall, unless the Fed changes course, we are heading into a long, painful adjustment period. Some jobs will come back. Others won't. Some companies will adapt. Others will vanish. And through it all, the American worker is once again being asked to carry the burden. So if you're watching this and wondering whether your job is safe, the truth is no one's job is truly safe right now. Not because you're not skilled, not because your company doesn't value you, but because the economy is forcing decisions that cut deeper than performance or loyalty. It's about spreadsheets, not people. It's about cash flow, not culture. And as sad as that is, it's the reality we're living in. But awareness is the first step. Understanding what's really driving these layoffs, the debt, the rates, the refinancing crisis, gives you a chance to prepare, to pivot, to protect yourself. If this gave you a new lens on what's happening behind the corporate curtain, then you're already ahead of the curve. Because this wave of job cuts isn't going to stop with one industry, one region, or one company. It's coming for all of us, and the time to pay attention is now.